That is why we need laws and rules and a public voice. That's why we need limitations on the power and the wealth of corporations to corrupt our political process. That's why we are in the fix we are in.
Big fix.
We cannot rely on corporations to respond to the needs of average working people and most of the people of this country. We have to stick up for ourselves.
What you're talking about be addressed without dealing with Citizens United first.
Yes, thank you.
There are about, I count 4 horrible Supreme Court decisions that I know about historically. Among them are Dred Scott.
Yeah, that's Ferguson.
And Plessy against Ferguson.
Yep.
And Bush against Gore. But in that 4, let's not forget Citizens United against the Federal Election Commission. And what we got to do is we've got to work to make sure that when the next Supreme Court vacancy occurs, that Supreme Court vacancy is filled with somebody who is pledged to repealing Citizens United. Yes.
Can you talk about crushing debt? Because it seems to me that debt piled on debt piled on debt. We're watching the Eurozone and seeing the austerity packages in Greece and Italy, and to me they're just cutting and cutting and cutting. Also, they can pay the interest on the debt.
Yeah.
Debt on more debt.
The question is about debt. Do not be fooled about this. We have a jobs crisis and we've got a wage crisis. We do not have a debt crisis.
Right. That's true.
We could have a debt crisis 10 or 15 years from now, especially if we don't get the economy going and we don't get jobs back. The number one responsibility, the number one goal is jobs and wages in the economy. The debt scare, the debt panic is not real. Over the long term, you know why the debt's going up? Over the long term, it's going up because healthcare costs are going up. And that's pushing Medicare and Medicare costs up.
Unfunded wars.
And what we've got, and unfunded wars as well. And what we've got to do is not only cut the defense budget, but we have also got to move to a single-payer system in this country. Well, you see how it's all connected up. It's all connected up. Everything that we're talking about, all the dots are connected up with each other. Instead of fighting for a single payer over here and fighting for better environment and against global climate change over here and fighting for something over here, it's all connected to enormous wealth and power at the top that is not allowing the people to do what the people need to do.
Speaking of enormous wealth and power at the top, I just heard on NPR that actually the banks think they're starting to do very poorly. They're losing a lot of profit.
Not Bank of America.
Yeah, even
They've got
but no, I'm just saying in the larger picture. So we have
Magic math. $2 billion.
Well, the question is you're saying the banks are actually losing some money. Yes, they are losing some money, but that goes back to the point that, again, a very fundamental point here, and that is that we are going to save capitalism from itself. In other words, if we take the economy back, if we have a more just society, if we have a financial system that is transparent, a financial system in which there's a division between commercial and investment banking, a financial system in which we limit the size of the big banks, that helps the entire system. It helps everybody. It helps the rich. This is not class warfare. It's not a zero-sum game. Yes.
What do you think the Federal Reserve's role is in the present crisis?
The question is, we're getting very technical, but I'm happy. This is a teaching, and I'll keep on going. I'm going until you get exhausted. The question is, what's the Federal Reserve's role in the current crisis? We talked about that a little bit before. The Federal Reserve, what the Federal Reserve failed to do, and Alan Greenspan was head of the Federal Reserve, and this is one of his worst legacies, he failed to oversee the banks.
Right.
He reduced interest rates to almost near zero, and then he said we don't need to worry and we don't need to regulate. And when you reduce interest rates to zero and make money essentially free to the banks, and then you say, oh, by the way, we're not going to regulate them, we're going to let you do what you want to do, banks, with all that money, you are begging for trouble, and that is exactly what happened. And who got in trouble? Not the banks. Well, they did initially, but they got bailed out.
They socialize.
Who got in trouble? We did.
We, the people.
Constitution, so!
Yes.
Most of us have, since this surge, this birth happened, have had overarching concerns about being co-opted by a number of organizations or possibilities. And for that, thank you for reminding us that we'll only lose if we reduce what this movement represents to a list of demands, and not going into that. At the same time, I just came from Washington, where we had this amazing overlap of Tea Partiers coming in and all, and I do love. I think it's critical we increase our masses so that we're more inclusive of Canadians and the needs of this country. You know what it's like to kind of work together mutually for tensions. But what's upsetting me is the way instead, since we're not stepping to simplify and reduce our demands, if you will, to it's being done for us in the media, and I am concerned because I am a linear liberal for life that we're become reduced to simply us versus them. We're petty, narcissistic. I want this because you had yours. And what my conviction is, this movement, it can't be still, but it represents fundamentally right and wrong, like you said, in heart. And most of us, we would sacrifice economically to preserve our planet and to preserve an education system and a spirit. So how do we bring that in without elaborating?
Look, you're expressing a fear that a lot of people have, and it's an understandable fear. How do you avoid being co-opted? How do you avoid the media putting a label on you, like the media very often wants to do, and say you're this or you're that? How do you avoid just the natural tendency of people to want to either see this movement as a bunch of 60s hippies or basically people who are at the fringe of America instead of at the center of America. And they're going to try to do that. The right is going to do that. Republicans are already doing that. Well, you know what you do? You just stick to your guns. You just stick to your guns. You have confidence. You have confidence in what you're doing. And don't be afraid of alliances. You know, I was always very short. I was always bullied. People were always, the big kids were always beating me up. Well, how did I survive? I survived because I made alliances.
Tall in stature, Robert.
Yeah. Can you talk about the right to assemble in America as far as free speech is concerned? There's a lot of municipalities, cities enacting laws that have been on the books that they're now using to target people who are trying to freely express themselves.
Does our right to gather end at 10 p.m.?
The question is, what about the right to assemble? It's right there in the Constitution. The right to speech is in part a right to get together, to assemble. If people could not assemble, what kind of democracy would we have? And there are a lot of municipalities, there are a lot of statutes on the books that make it very difficult for people to assemble. And people are being harassed all around this country for trying to come together and exercise their constitutional rights to get together. And I think that what we've got to do is still keep in mind exactly what was said a moment ago. This is a people's movement. This is about the moral basis of democracy. This is about taking our economy and our democracy back from people who have taken it away from us. And that means, again, confidence. There are going to be fights along the way. This is not going to be easy. Anybody who signed up and thinks this is going to be easy, I have news for you. It's not going to be easy. It's a struggle. But there's no struggle more important.
For years I've been horrified by, just to sum it up, basically our prison industrial complex.
Right.
And the reality of, some of the police state stuff that goes on in America. In the last couple of years, 2 men in my family have gone to prison and my family is especially acutely aware of this situation now. And we fear for their safety. And when you look at their cases, there's like all this corruption in like every place that you look, and even in like something like the prisons unions. I guess I wanted to get your take on prison reform.
There is an economic imperative. The question is prison reform. When we are locking up, as we are in this country, millions of people, more than we've ever locked up before, we are paying a fortune, and many of these people are non-violent offenders. And by being locked up, they become violent offenders, some of them.
Yes.
That's right.
Why do we lock up so many non-violent offenders? So many people who have violated nothing but the drug laws. So many people who are violating the laws with regard to marijuana.
Yes.
I mean, we've got to reform. Part of the people's movement, in my view, is to reform our correction system.
Yes.
So it's a correct system. It's not just a correction system.
Not a business.
And look at, there are two major businesses in America. Dwight D. Eisenhower reminded us and warned us of the military-industrial complex. We also have the prison-industrial complex. And you know that both of them are major jobs programs. We don't have jobs programs in this country. Isn't it amazingly absurd? We have a military program that is a jobs program, and we have a prison program that's a jobs program. Well, it's about time we had a real jobs program that was a real jobs program.
Yes. Take a shot.
Next 30 bags, and out 4 bags. And the dogs run through, they got people. This is a jobs program to carve up those bags and that gives people more work.
The question is, you've got banks that are laying off thousands of people right now, and the top executives are doing better and better. 40 years ago, the typical executive of a big bank or any big company in this country was earning 40 times the average worker salary. And I remember 40 years ago when I started looking at this stuff, I thought, that's pretty bad. Well, right now, the typical top executive is earning 300 times. 300 times what the typical worker is earning. And one way they keep those profits up is they cut costs. And one way they cut costs is they cut labor. And they reduce wages. And they reduce jobs. And again, if we had an economy that was working for us instead of them, that would not happen. Again, I go back to the moral center of this movement. It's about taking back the democracy and taking back the economy that is America. And if we want to get grandiose about it, taking back democracies and economies all over the world for the people.
Well, they're doing it.